it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Out of Bounds podcast, episode 69 here. We are back just a couple days away from another signature event here on the PGA Tour and about a week removed or away from the second major of the 2024 campaign. Let's talk about last week. Let's start with LIV Singapore. Pretty interesting event. Obviously, you were following it pretty closely. We had our shared frustration, of course, that we couldn't see golf live, and they were showing it on a 12-hour delay, basically?
Yeah, they do this with all the international events. They don't show, so it would go on about 9 o'clock Eastern for each night there at Singapore. They had a rain delay on Saturday night, well, it would have been their Sunday round, which forced the round to be started an hour earlier. So it started at 8 o'clock in the Eastern time zone. So that's 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. You're like, okay, I'll turn on some golf. I'm watching the NBA playoffs. I'm watching the NHL playoffs. Might as well watch a little golf, too. You channel flip all around. You go to the CW and they're showing reruns of forensic files from 10 years ago. You're like, okay. So it's not on. So you go and take a look around and you see Brooks Koepka's winning, and he had been winning a lot and he'd been playing very well, which is cool to see. A good leaderboard too. Cam Smith also playing well. A couple other really high profile names playing well over there in Singapore. The huge rain delay also brought out some really fun kind of clips from behind the scenes in LIV. They were in the locker room, and I think it was on Bryson DeChambeau's story. It might have been, I can't remember exactly who it was, hitting chip shots in the locker room too with the real golf ball and banging it off the walls and stuff like that. So it's just the players having fun like that. It's always fun to see. But yeah, at the end of the day, Brooks Koepka comes out with his fourth career LIV Tour win, sets the pace and the record, of course, in that new startup league with 4 wins on that tour. Pretty good timing for the guy who's going to be defending in a couple weeks in Louisville, Kentucky at Valhalla.
What do you make? I feel like there's a couple different ways to look at it. What do you make of his swings back and forth? Seems like we see just stunning greatness out of him, and then the opposite end, total non-factor. And it seems that it can just turn on like a light switch. What do you make of that? Is that just part of how he plays and how he's approached professional golf throughout his career?
Yeah, definitely, Josh. And I think the biggest thing for a guy like Brooks Koepka is health. I mean, we saw him dominate majors in that 2019, 2018 era. He goes down with that knee injury, and that totally derails him. We see some missed cuts out of him. We see some swings out of him that just don't look like Brooks Koepka. He couldn't even get down and look at a putt. He had some troubles kind of reading the putt on the green. It just doesn't look at all like Brooks Koepka. And that takes away some of the mental side of him too, which is probably one of the bigger parts of his game, is he's able to turn on at any moment. He just wasn't able to do that. He comes back, he gets healthy, wins major last year, and now he's winning on the LIV Tour. He just has that swagger to him. He has that Brooks Koepka presence to him now, where he's gonna steamroll you, and you better like it or not. He's gonna come up for the victory.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see a lot of similarities between the way he plays golf when he's on and the way Scottie Scheffler plays. But it's interesting. They approach it very similarly from a mental standpoint, where they both seem to be able to get into a zone and then they just sort of go away and they're in that place and they're unstoppable when they're on. But I just can't overlook the swing the other way for Brooks, even after the injury, because I remember hearing that the knee injury that you referenced was at least a bigger reason why he chose to go to LIV in the first place, to create some guarantees and to sort of stabilize himself, because he didn't really know what was going to happen. But at the same time, a lot of folks will say, hey, Brooks is the most dominant player when it comes to majors in the last 6 to 8 years, and just based purely on the number of wins. Yeah, sure, absolutely agree. But when you compare it to a run that Scottie Scheffler has been on now for the last 2.5 years, to me, they look very different. And it's just interesting. It's going to be very interesting now heading into Valhalla, heading into the PGA Championship, where Brooks has played incredibly well in the past. This tournament, is one that he really, in a lot of ways, has owned over the last 7 or 8 years. To see how that matches up against the consistency that Scottie Scheffler has been putting forward, assuming his wife Meredith has this baby and he is actually able to play. He has said that he will not play if the timing doesn't work out. And I believe as of recording this, they're still expecting their first child. So wouldn't that be something if Scottie Scheffler just wasn't able to play next week in the PGA Championship? We're going to talk about an asterisk here in a little bit. I think that would qualify as a legitimate asterisk if he wasn't in the field come that Thursday.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I see Scottie Scheffler will be playing next week and looking to win the second major of the year. Josh, I just see such a big difference between Koepka and Scheffler, in terms of how they play the game of golf. I think, Scottie's just an incredible ball striker, one of the best ball strikers we've seen, since Tiger Woods. And Scottie plays the game a little bit more simply too, and we've seen the putting woes kind of rear their ugly head, but lately they haven't been. But Koepka is just so money in that 15-foot range in major championships. When the greens are icy, when the greens are barely alive, when the greens are like pavement, it seems like Brooks Koepka makes these 15-footers and makes them at huge, huge times too. So Brooks just has that swagger to him. He has that gamer aspect to him where he's hard not to pick and look at too, and just such an intimidating presence too. Brooks Koepka being this absolutely ripped guy too is definitely helps him out too when he's getting down low in those major championships.
I think it's interesting also. We don't talk that often. People don't talk that often about the pace of play difference between these two guys. I think it's pretty significant. Brooks, I think, plays a lot faster than Scottie does. And I wouldn't say Scottie is necessarily a slow player. I just think he's more deliberate. And when you're comparing any player to Brooks just plays a lot faster in general.
Yeah, Brooks just gets up and hits it. Yeah, Scottie is definitely not a slow player. I like that kind of comparison you made. Deliberate is definitely a good word for him. He just kind of is able to get into this tunnel vision and get into this own world where he's on this golf course where he's not gonna do anything that would put him out of the golf tournament. He's very good and very polished in that regard, right? Where people are gonna be like, you go and watch him in person, and he almost looks like he doesn't even know any of the patrons or fans are there, which is pretty amazing for a guy like Scottie Scheffler, how he's able to kind of get in that mindset of, we're just out here playing golf.
He legit zones out.
Yeah.
Like legitimately zones out. Okay, so let's shift gears here and talk about the CJ Cup Byron Nelson. I would like to file a complaint, a grievance with the PGA Tour that this is the worst name for a golf tournament in the history of named golf tournaments. CJ Cup Byron Nelson. Like, it is just, it's either missing words or it's too many words. The PGA Tour needs to get that figured out before next year. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my mind.
I think they kind of had to go on the fly on that one too with all the schedule changes, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, so Ben Coles had maybe the worst 72nd hole in the last couple of years on the PGA Tour. Had a lead, lost the lead, loses it, looked absolutely atrocious around the green there. Had that pitch shot that just kind of went nowhere, kind of flailed at it a little bit, just looked abysmal. When you watched that, you were watching it live, right? What did you make of that situation as it was unfolding?
Man, it just proves how hard it is to win a golf tournament. It proves how hard it is to win a PGA Tour golf tournament. Ben Coles makes this miraculous birdie on 16. He hits it tight. He makes another birdie on 17, where he has his one-stroke lead on Taylor Pendrith going in the 18th hole, and then, like you said, Josh flubs it. And then he has another opportunity to knock in a 5-footer to force a playoff, and he misses that too. So it's just really sad. It kind of breaks your heart a little bit too, and just shows how hard it is to win a golf tournament on the PGA Tour. But let's talk about Taylor Pendrith. Gets his first career PGA Tour victory, and notch another peg on the Canadian thing that I'm always looking at too, as Taylor Pendrith gets it done. He also played a great round too, but and fought off Ben Coles towards the end there, but didn't really have to, as Ben kind of did it to himself. But yeah, Pendrith in the winner's circle.
Yeah, it was a good, and obviously terrible end for the way that ended for Ben Coles, but again, a great way for a non-elevated, a non-signature event to end. with some action there coming down the stretch on the 71st and 72nd hole.
Yeah, definitely. It's always fun to see some fireworks towards the end.
Yeah. So let's talk about Taylor Gooch getting his invite to the PGA Championship. This, of course, came one day after he said he wouldn't attempt to qualify for the U.S. Open. You and I were texting about this as this whole thing was spinning out and spinning up in golf media. What are you thinking now that you've had a little bit of time to digest everything?
So for those that don't remember, Taylor Gooch came out and said something along the lines of there being an asterisk for the Masters because he's not there. He didn't exactly say that. He definitely said that a lot differently. We've seen the quotes and we've seen Rory talk about it, how it didn't come out that way. But that was sort of the general message and sort of the takeaway that people have. You go fast forward to the Rory talks about it a little bit too before the Masters. He references Joaquin Niemann and how Joaquin played in a couple different events to help him get that special invite to the Masters. So that's also a cool thing too. And you're like, okay, well, Joaquin fought for this and did his best and not just went to the headlines for it. So Taylor Gooch doesn't come out. They ask him at a LIV tournament if he's going to try to qualify for the U.S. Open. Brooks Koepka is on his team. Obviously doesn't have to qualify. Graham McDowell said, yep, I'm going to qualify. Jason Kokrak, his other teammate, says, yes, I'm going to qualify. And then they go to Taylor, are you going to qualify? And he simply says, I'm not. So that obviously sparks some interest from the golf community, right? This guy is talking about all these majors and then he's not even going to try. So you're like, okay, or that's kind of interesting. But now he's going to get an invite to the PGA Championship. And at the end of the day, Josh, that's a good thing. We want to get all the best golfers playing against each other. We've talked about that at ends here, especially on this podcast. I talked about it at ends anywhere else. We want to see the best players playing the best players. And that's what we're going to see when Taylor Gooch tees it up at Valhalla.
Yeah. I just think the thing for me was I thought there would be more at risk for him to try and qualify and not qualify than to simply sit this one out, because we know, right, within the next year or so, there's going to be framework in place so that guys who are playing over on LIV can more or less automatically qualify based on how they play their 4 majors. I just thought that with everything that had been said before, I appreciated his answer this time, that it was more reserved. He just answered the question, moved on, didn't make a big deal about it. I think the golf media quickly got over the idea that, it was trying to blow this thing up a little more than I think it really warranted. Look, at the end of the day, I think the top 10 guys in LIV should just have rolling invites to majors at this point. Like, that's kind of where I sit with this thing. Maybe it's not 10, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 8, maybe I don't know what the exact number is, but roughly 10-ish guys on LIV are certainly good enough to play in the 4 majors on tour. I don't, I don't see how you could possibly argue otherwise, especially when you are going to have, for example, using the U.S. Open as one such, you're going to have people qualifying who aren't even like professional golfers. Like, anybody can qualify for the U.S. Open. That's the whole point of the Open. But it's just one of those interesting scenarios. Give the top 10 guys in LIV an invite to all of the majors, and let's just stop with this nonsense back and forth.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that, Josh, that we need to find out what some of these top LIV golfers are going to be needing to do to get into these majors. I think that'll change over the next few years, especially with OWGR becoming obsolete, right? We talked about that at length too. That's just not a good form of how to describe the best golfers in the world. So I would expect that they'll figure that out in the next few years. But Josh, what do you think Gooch has to do at Valhalla in a couple weeks to kind of, I don't know, quote unquote, validate his invite to the PGA Championship?
Top 25?
Yeah, I think that more than validates it. I think if he makes even if he makes a cut and he makes an appearance, on Saturday, makes a little run, I think that even gets the storyline going. That'd be good for LIV too, to get the broadcast talking about him too. You're talking about this LIV golfer who's been very adamant that he should be here in the majors. If he comes out and doesn't play well and misses the cut, that adds fuel to the fire too, the other way. So I think it's a really big week for Taylor Gooch in terms of what he does and how it looks for the LIV tour. Yeah,
I mean, look, anybody who has a problem has a problem with that should just look at Justin Thomas's track record over the last 18 months or so in majors. It's abysmal. It's bad. Not saying he shouldn't be there, but you can't make an argument on one player's behalf just because they're playing on the PGA Tour and, use that same argument against another player because they're playing over on LIV. We don't see that with any of the other tours that are recognized by OWGR. And like you said, OWGR is on its way out anyway, just not relevant. So, I think it's top 25. And, if he plays better than that, boy, would he ever be showing the hate or something then?
Yeah, that would be unbelievably amazing because, Taylor Gooch has been just one of the more high profile players over on LIV. He's won back-to-back events last year and he played very well too. So I think people that are PGA Tour people see that name Taylor Gooch and you win all these LIV Tour events and you're like, this guy's not very good. He's winning over on LIV. So I think it'd be really cool if he does play well to kind of show that this player has game and kind of show who he is too to the more American PGA Tour side of things too at the PGA Championship.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting just how much things have changed on the PGA Tour because, this whole argument of, a win over on LIV doesn't mean as much as a win on the PGA Tour. A lot of that was based on the old schedule, right? Like the old way of doing business on the PGA Tour. Now we've got small field events. We've got elevated events here on the PGA Tour where only 70 guys are participating with no cuts. And, you've got this new system in place, which we've talked about liking, the next 10 and the next 5, sort of the way that the non-elevated guys or the guys that sit outside, say the top 50 or 60 in the world, are gaining entry into these new events or these elevated events. So much has changed. So it's just not a clean comparison to say, a win on LIV doesn't mean as much as a win on the PGA Tour. Just as
Yeah, especially this week, Josh. I know we're foreshadowing a little bit, but Scotty Scheffler's not playing. Ludwig Aberg's not playing.
Yeah.
It becomes a little bit similar in respect, right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Ludwig. Pretty big news there. He's joining TGL's The Bay Golf Club, along with Wyndham Clark, Minwoo Lee, and Shane Lowry. Another announcement, another big signing. This arguably, especially with how quickly we've seen him rise to prominence on the PGA Tour over the last really just year, and given his age, how young he is, this could be the biggest signing of all so far for TGL. What do you make?
Yeah, this Bay Golf Club, is really formatting a good team here with Ludwig Wyndham, Minwoo Lee, and Shane Lowry. Obviously, Wyndham Clark has just been incredible on the golf course. He's won a couple high-profile events last year. He's won another one this year. He could possibly play well the rest of this year, too, as he's been playing pretty good. You have a guy like Ludwig Aberg, who we don't even need to talk about how he's been incredible throughout his first couple years on the tour. Shane Lowry is a guy that everyone loves. That love video is coming out after the win with Rory a couple weeks ago. Pretty cool. Minwoo Lee is a guy that's huge on social media. He's yet to really break out on the PGA Tour, but that's going to come. I think he's definitely going to get there eventually. So this is just an all fun team to watch, and I think this team is really gonna show people how good at golf they are. And I think this team has the most possibility to grab some of that international audience. So I think the makers of this team really did a nice job in formatting and formulating this team.
Yeah, and it just goes back to the point. I think TGL is one of the more exciting things that golf has on the horizon coming up here. This is going to be an awesome product, and I think once it launches, I think it's going to have a better opportunity to hook, say, the casual golf fan to broadcast golf than traditional golf tournaments. I'm assuming these events are going to be much shorter than a golf broadcast is at a tournament, so it will be very helpful in terms of growing that part of the game, because we've talked about it ad nauseum here about just how broadcast golf is lagged behind, and this is something that we really have to see as a serious opportunity for the game.
Yeah, and I think it would have been huge this year too. They had a little bit of problems in building where they had delayed a year, but I think it's going to be really good for the casual golf fans. A little bit shorter. It's on maybe a Monday night where they're not competing with a lot of different sports opportunities in that January, February, March months.
NBC Sports says U.S. Open coverage is going to feature a 4-man broadcast booth with Brandel Chambly, Brad Faxon. They will be doing the lead analyst duties. And then we've got Dan Hicks and Mike Tirico anchoring. Nate, what do you make of the lineup that NBC is bringing out for the next major?
People don't love to see Brandel Chambly on there, but I think Brandel does a nice job. I really do. I think some of the things he says can be polarizing, and I think that's almost a good thing for an analyst role. Get people's minds rolling, get people, kind of getting mad at the TV, right? Saying, why the heck is this guy saying that? And Dan Hicks is just one of the best golf commentators ever. I think Mike Tirico does a nice job too, in that sort of play-by-play role. So I think this is a pretty good booth, all in all.
Yeah, I think Dan Hicks is the GOAT. You and I were talking about this. I like him on the play-by-play more than, frankly, anybody. Mike Tirico, obviously a voice that we're all used to hearing and listening to. Brad Faxon might be the most underrated analyst that NBC has.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, too, because I hear him a lot on the radio, and I think of him more as like a PGA Tour radio voice more than I do like a guy who's out on the course. I thought the criticism that they didn't get some of the younger guys like Colt or Smiley into the lead analyst role. I think some of that is fair because those guys have definitely built up a bit of a serious following here. But at the end of the day, I think all told, I like this lineup and I think it can work.
Yeah, it should be good. And the most important thing is this is the U.S. Open. They're going to show 12 hours of coverage a day. It's not going to be like the Masters where you're searching high and tail to try to find a stream right on the app. So it's going to be nice to just watch golf wall-to-wall coverage and listen to whoever's going to tell me it is good as long as I can see it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's also talk about Sunday Red before we get into the next couple events here coming up. Sunday Red, I think by now we've all had time to soak in what that branding and what that marketing is all about. I know you have I feel like you have a hot take about it.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy that it's a line that we've seen it already. Tiger's been wearing it for a little while now, and we've been kind of critical. I think me more so than you on the logo. How the logo just isn't great. That old TW logo at Nike is something that is really synonymous with Tiger Woods and one that's hard to follow up. But the Sunday Red definitely is one that is an interesting one to me. And then they come out with the clothing line, Josh. They released the prices, and they released the clothing line last week, and they're charging like between $125 and $150 for a polo. And Josh, the Sunday Red logo is not even on it. So it's just the logo polo I was looking at first is just a red polo, and they got a $125 price tag on it, and that just seems wild to me. But then you go back and you look at sort of where golf apparel has gone, and Josh, we do another podcast on this if one day we want to. And golf apparel has increased a ton throughout the rise of golf in the last few years too. So I guess it kind of makes sense that they got to charge $125. So I'll put a logo on the shirt, right?
They're trying to be premium. I think that's really what's going on here. Like they're trying to sell the premium, non-intense, in-your-face, smack your logo kind of stuff that we see in some of the less premium brands. I think the golf apparel space is maybe the most saturated it's ever been. Mainly because of like copycat brands that, have popped up because of social media and, morphed into something that, is a household name. I think, I don't really think it matters, right? Like how much apparel Tiger, this company sells. Like, I think really what it comes down to is Sunday Red is giving Tiger a vessel to be a kind of have a brand in golf that isn't totally contingent on him. So they will eventually, I said this, I think the first time we talked about it, but like this gives him the opportunity to sign golfers to Sunday Red down the line and make the brand about more than just him. And I think that was what he was trying to achieve. And unfortunately, I think the price point of what we're seeing for like what you're talking about, a polo that's 125 plus, That's just a reflection of where, you know, golf apparel is. It's crazy. It's crazy expensive.
Yeah, Josh, I get that for sure, definitely. But it is just tough when you look at this polo and you kind of look at it and you look down at the price tag and it's $125. I certainly didn't buy one and I don't have any plans to. But that's okay if you do.
Yeah, no. Okay, so let's look ahead. We've got the Wells Fargo here coming up this weekend at Quail Hollow, an absolutely historic spot on tour. Scotty Scheffler and Ludwig Aberg, as we talked about, not in the field. That means 69 players making their way to Quail Hollow. Rory, Wyndham, Xander, Sahith, Victor, Cantlay, Homa, and Harman are your favorites in terms of betting odds right now. What are you seeing? What are you liking?
So this one's a little bit tough too, especially without Scotty and Ludwig Aberg. You kind of have a scenario where, you know, almost any of those guys that you just mentioned can win, and there's some others I think too can win. So looking at Ludwig Aberg, it's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully he has plans to play at Valhalla in 2 weeks. He did cite a little bit of some problems with his knee, so hopefully he can play at the PGA Championship. He has full participant in that tournament, and he plans to play in it. But hopefully we see him. I think it's going to be interesting. With Scotty not playing this week, is he's just giving everyone else a chance to win, right?
Yeah, I mean that's really Wyndham being your defending champ here, I think is interesting because this is we're just about to the 1 year mark, right? Of him really rising to prominence. Before this event last year, Wyndham was just another guy on tour.
Yeah, and they do a very good job in full swing of highlighting kind of the rise of Wyndham Clark last season, where he kind of was this always really high-touted amateur player from the West Coast and, you know, did a lot of winning and stuff early in his career, and then got to the PGA Tour and had a little bit hard time with it. Had some hard time with his temper, had some hard time with the mental side of golf, which is obviously so tough to do. And then he went to a sports psychologist and then started doing all this winning, right? Won the Wells Fargo last year, a year ago this week. And then he won the U.S. Open not too long after. So pretty cool for Wyndham Clark. He's played very well this year. You know, he won at Pebble Beach, and he's played well besides that too. So I think he could play well this week. Although I think we're ready to do picks here. I'm going to go with Xander. I think Xander has the opportunity to play well. He's played very well this season and played well here last year. He was a runner-up here last year. This year, in just the last few events, he was T2 at the Players, 8th at the Masters, tied for 5th at the Valspar, in the top 20 at T18 at the Heritage, and then T23 with Cantlay over at the Zurich. The only finish there is outside of the top 20 is the Zurich, but that being a team golf tournament, that's a little bit different in a sense too, right? So I don't know if I fully take stock into that tournament, but he's played very well lately. Very well, but in a quiet sense, like in the Masters, he was kind of not really necessarily in the hunt at all. Played well on Saturday though, but I think Xander needs to hop up and grab something, you know, sooner rather than later, in my opinion, and I'm ready for him to do it this week.
Yeah, you know, I got a couple different things I want to say here about this. First, I like Rory. You know, I think coming off of that win, of course, like you said, a team win, so I guess we won't necessarily count it quite the same as an independent individual win, but a win nonetheless on tour, and one that he really had to play well to make happen. So I guess he would be my pick. I think it would set up a really nice storyline heading into the PGA here. Of course, a tournament that he's completely capable of winning, but I'm far more interested to see how Viktor Hovland plays. We've seen him be in the top 10 in betting odds every single elevated event this year, and he has just not performed. He has played as poorly as you could possibly imagine, or as one could possibly imagine, and he just doesn't look anywhere close to form. I want to see him play well because, you know, the PGA Tour is better when he's playing well, as we saw last fall.
For sure.
But so far we haven't seen it. And, you know, 2 majors down, all of a sudden we're only a few weeks away from the U.S. Open, and the season's kind of slipping away at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, Victor lit the world on fire last fall between how well he played in the FedEx Cup with those wins and just becoming, you know, talking about him as one of the best top 3 golfers in the world at the time, to kind of, you know, playing well in the Ryder Cup and helping Europe get the victory, and then plays not that well this whole season. We've seen some little flashes of him, but it is interesting for Victor to just kind of put himself right out of the conversation. And like you said, Josh, the season, as you might think about it, like you said, it is still young in a sense, but it can slip by very fast as we get into this major season and really start knocking events out of the way in the next couple months.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I had to kind of like think to myself, well, geez, we've got even a lot of the signature events are already over, and we're going to have the second major of the season done. And at what point? So if you're a fan of Victor Hovland, or if you're talking to someone in the Hovland camp, when do you start to worry? I don't want to say panic, but when do you start to worry about what this year is going to look like in total if he does not start to get in form?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would like to think that any of them are going to say they don't worry at all. That's the best. That's always the answer in terms of golf. But I think in the back of their head, they're going to worry a little bit. Victor has shown not a lot this year, but he's one of those kind of guys that can come out and win in terrible form. So I think it's hard to ever count him out, but that's something we've been able to successfully do all season.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting scenarios where I start to wonder. I would put the line at the U.S. Open, I think.
Yeah, that's probably a good spot.
If you get through the U.S. Open and you still haven't turned it around, say it's a missed cut, at that point, 3 down, yes, he could come to life toward the playoffs, I suppose. But if his finishes don't start to improve, I think he's going to kind of be in a scenario where there may be some uncertainty as to whether he can even make it through the playoffs to do what he did last year in the final 2 events.
Right.
So, stuff.
But what we saw, all you got to do is put yourself there in the playoffs, with those enhanced point getting spots and play your best golf in the end. We saw that from a couple different players last year, including, Victor Hovland. So yep. I think it's going to be hard for him not to get there. But yeah, if he keeps playing like he is, I think we could be seeing another Justin Thomas situation as we go towards the fall.
All right. Hey, that's going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. We'll be back next week with the recap show. Follow us over on TikTok and Instagram for more throughout the week. And remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.